It's 9:30, so let's get the show on the road. One more minute. Thank you very much. Give me 1 minute here. There we go. It'll be in the appointed time of 9:30. We're going to open Senate Ways and Means Committee, and Senator Rosenwald, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're going to open a public hearing on House Bill 1191. I recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Healy.
Good morning. Representative Bob Healy from Merrimack. I'm here to introduce bipartisan bill 191. This is a Meals on Wheels program. I'm going to be brief and just say that it's pretty self-explanatory. The program was brought together a lot of people at a time of loneliness and isolation has skyrocketed. It allows seniors, rather than just getting meals delivered to them, the opportunity to get out. And what many times is an empty home where the delivery person may only be the person they see and act during the day. To me and many of the sponsors, it makes no sense to grant state funds to a group organization and then tax them when they use those funds. When we ran into the governor event, he told them about the issue and said, get the bill to my desk and I'll sign it. And the president of Meals on Wheels, John Acquisio, is here and he'll testify and answer any questions should you need it.
Any questions, Senator Roosevelt? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
And Bob, I'm just adding you to the check-in sheet. Next up is John.
Thank you, Chairman Lang, committee members. My name is John Araquezo. I'm the president and CEO of Meals on Wheels of Hillsborough County. And this bill is very important to our older citizens in that it allows us to continue and perhaps expand our Dine Out Club program by making it more cost efficient. Right now, we are paying restaurants to serve meals to seniors. We pay the restaurant through federal and state dollars, and the restaurant serves that meal to that individual for free. And this has been a huge effort in that it has helped reduce social isolation all around our county. It's been very successful. In order to be efficient, we would like to do away with the sales tax on this program for these items. It doesn't make sense that we're using state dollars and then taxing state dollars. So the restaurants have agreed to reduce what they charge us by the amount that they will save on the taxes. This makes it more efficient. So that's my testimony, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Senator Roosevelt.
How do you transport? Does somebody transport the recipients to the restaurants, or are they responsible for getting there themselves?
Well, they're responsible for doing it themselves, but we do provide transportation. We have a bus. I know that there's some assisted living programs that have buses that bring people into these restaurants. I was there this morning. One of the restaurants was packed, Frank Coors in Manchester, and about 60% of the people that were in that restaurant were on the Dine Out Club.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Dick Boulay. I represent Senior Meals on Wheels statewide. As you know, right now, this started off as a pilot program in Hillsborough County, and John has done a great job in really cultivating more support throughout the state. And as a result, many of the other agencies throughout the state would like to take part in this program. I'd like to read a letter into the record, and I'll give you a copy, from an agency up north, up in the Coas County. And it comes from Angela Johnson, Director of Tri-County Community Action. Dear Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, please accept this correspondence from Tri-County Community Action Programs Incorporated, Senior Meals of Coas County, in support of House Bill 1191 FN Restaurant Voucher Program to be exempt from the room and meals tax. The success of the restaurant voucher program by the Meals on Wheels Hillsborough County offers choice in dining for local senior residents to enjoy a delicious, nutritious meal with families and friends and support local restaurants. And that's important, that some of these restaurants need extra people coming in the door. So they really welcome this. Benefits from area seniors is the companionship and time spent enjoying a meal together and possibly meeting a new friend or two. Senior Meals of Coas County is currently working on developing restaurant partnerships in the North Country. And by waiving the room and meals tax, it would certainly help support the financial visibility of the RVP in serving our most northern senior residents. Thank you for your consideration. I want to point out that I talked to the director just recently, and they are opening, I believe this week or next, a restaurant site in Pittsburgh, and I think that's great. And down the road, in a week or two, they're going to be starting one in Cobra. So this is fantastic in my way of thinking, because those areas really need that. I want to say the director from Rockingham County is here with us this morning, and he is looking at some of the rural areas in his county, some of the towns that probably could use programs like that. And I've talked to Mr. Summers from the Restaurant Association, and he's willing to sit down and work with him in finding those restaurants that would be interested. So it started in Hillsborough. It's moving to other counties throughout the state, and I didn't want to leave out also Sullivan County that could really use this. Brenda Burns, the director there, is trying to, she has found a site up there in that area. So it's going to be a statewide program, and it's really be helpful to pass this bill, and I hope you can do that. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
Ken and Lauren. Come on up.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Keen Meng Wong, Tax Policy Counsel with the DRA.
Good morning. My name is Lauren O'Sullivan, Senior Financial Analyst with the DRA.
The DRA does not have a position on this bill. We are unfortunately unable to provide any kind of numbers or calculations in terms of a fiscal impact because our forms don't really capture when the operator is participating in these RVP programs. So essentially, we don't have the numbers, and the numbers essentially probably is going to be best coming from DHHS. They are the ones who actually administer with their agency partner and with the restaurants as well in terms of administering the program, and they would have the numbers in terms of what they pay out in terms of the meals cost and then the M&R that's associated with them as well. But we're here to answer any other questions that.
In short, I know that the fiscal note says right now, based on previous numbers, the estimated impact's about $86,000 to the rooms and meals tax, but that'll grow depending on how the program grows.
Yeah, those numbers are not from the DRA. Those numbers are actually from DHHS.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for DRA? Senator Roswell?
You. We heard previous testimony that this program would be helpful towards the sustainability of some more rural restaurants. Couldn't that down the road actually increase or offset some of the decrease from losing the rooms and meals tax here? If those restaurants thrive and do well, they could bring in, couldn't they bring in additional rooms and meals revenue?
Yes, essentially that could happen. Obviously, we can't predict what will happen in any particular restaurants or any particular county or municipality, but we can just from the direct impact that when you exempt the meals, a certain fraction of meals from the M&R tax, the direct impact would be a reduction to the M&R revenue. That's what we could say.
Though if they did bring guests with them that weren't participating in the program, because the point of the program is to get people out of their homes, then you could theoretically get tax from those meals from those at the table with them that are not participating.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else who wishes to testify on House Bill 1191? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on House Bill 1191 FN, and I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session. It's been moved by Senator Roosevelt, seconded by Senator Susie to go into executive session. I'd entertain a motion on House Bill 1191.
Yes, I'd like to move on to pass.
It's been moved by Senator Roosevelt, ought to pass, seconded by Senator Susie. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1191? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the bill is passed. I entertain a motion to come out of
So
executive session.
moved.
It's been moved to come out of executive session, seconded by Senator Susie. All those in favor say aye. Thank you. Senator Rosenwald will take it out. We have a couple minutes to wait for the next bill. Let's see. Do you want to do another one real quick on executive? We got 4 minutes.
Move that we go back into executive session.
It's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. I'd entertain a motion on House Bill 1631, establishing a commission to study the revenue alternatives of road tolls, road toll registration fees, and revenue alternatives for vehicle registrations to fund highway and bridge improvements.
I'd like to move on to pass.
It's been moved and seconded on House Bill 1631, ought to pass. Any further discussion on House Bill 1631? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, 3-0. And Senator Roosevelt, do you want to take that one out?
Sure. And we want to
Sure, let's
move
take on the
out
next
of
one. We'll take-
executive session?
Let's take 1549.
Okay. 1549.
So I'm going to move auto pass on House Bill 1549, FN.
Second.
I'm going to move amendment number 1321S. And I'll quickly just speak to the amendment. The amendment takes care of an issue that around what's called the rake, which is how much money is taken off the top of a given. The rake was so high on larger possible games since we raised it a couple of years ago that it would make it financially not feasible for a gaming operator to run or a gambler to be able to go play that game. So we adjusted the rake, and we also added a component that allows players to be able to tip the dealer, which is problematic. On the other way, it allows for a mechanism for the dealers to get tips. I'm going to have a secondary, a quick committee amendment if we pass this amendment, and I'll explain that if we get this one done. So-
Move that amendment, or did you move?
Yeah, I moved it, so Donna seconded it. 1321. Any further discussion on 1321? Seeing on all those in favor of Amendment 1321, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, 3-0. This bill is open to further amendment. So on line 11 of the amendment, it says that the dealer add-on shall not exceed 10%. It was brought to my attention that there are sometimes very small games. It's like $50 games, $25 games, $30 games, and the 10% add-on would not be very beneficial to the dealer, right? So what I'd like to do is change that one line. Instead of saying 10%, the dealer add-on shall not exceed $25. And then it could be anything up to that they can add on. So that's the amendment. I'm moving to amend on line 11, change 10% to $25.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you eliminating the words of the amount deducted?
Yeah,
or
Yep,
anything
we'll get rid
else?
of that. Yep,
So it would
just
read,
say shall not
shall
exceed
not exceed
$25
$25.
and
and that
Yep.
100%.
thank you for catching that.
Okay.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it 3-0. And the bill is, nope, now we have the final vote on the bill. So now we have the final vote on the bill as amended with the 2 amendments. And Senator Murphy, you're going to vote on this one, or you're going to? Okay, so we'll just keep it to us 3 for now, and then we'll go into the next bill. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it 3-0, and I'll take that one out. And now we can move through out of executive session.
Second.
I'll move that as executive session, and I will open, I'll look at that in a second. Open a public hearing on House Bill 450. Come on. Recognize Representative Jinigian to speak to his bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Representative John Janigian, representing Salem. And also, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. So I'm here to introduce HB 450. It's pretty straightforward. Really, the net operating loss consists of 3 major components. Just to simplify it, you've got an 80% max deduction that you can take on a loss. You've got a 10-year carry forward maximum, and you've got a $10 million cap. So what this bill proposes to do is get rid of, decouple from the IRS code, which is currently 80%. And we want to, the IRS code can change from time to time. And we want to just, in this case, bring it to 100% with the idea that we're helping small businesses because a lot of times, especially when a business first gets going, they've got losses and they don't have tons of cash. And this allows them to, we're still going to keep the $10 million limit and the 10-year cap. Because let's face it, if you're a small business running losses for 10 years, you're probably not even going to make it that long. So, that's pretty much where we're at with this one. And it passed the House Ways and Means Committee 19-0.
Question for the representative. I have one, John. So we have the carry forward period, the carry forward amount. Oh, this is the lost carry forward. Never mind. My question's fine. I was thinking about the credit carry forward
Oh,
and my concerns about having some of these values, but credit carry forward is a different component, so we'll
right.
not taking that up. This is just how much of the net operating loss they're allowed to carry forward each year to cover the next year's tax bill if necessary.
Right.
I have a question.
Go.
Thank you. So thank you for bringing us this bill. You still, you might incur another loss in the next year, right?
Right.
So it doesn't, it just collapses the period for which you can deduct the loss. It doesn't
You can only take the loss.
eliminate the credit for the loss. Is that right?
What we're saying, so for example, let's say you had a loss of $10,000 the first year.
Mhm.
And then the second year you had a, let me think this out. If you had a gain of $10,000, you wouldn't be able to wipe it out completely. You're capped at 80%, so you'd only be able to wipe out $8,000. So for a business that's just getting going, just struggling, maybe short on cash, that's where the problem comes in.
Okay, John, I just want to clarify. So we can use your example. First year I'm in business, I lose 10 grand, so I don't pay any business profits tax, everything's great.
Right.
Second year I make profit. However, if I carry forward that $10,000 in loss from the previous year, I may end up with no profit because of I'm able to carry that forward and deduct it from my profitability line.
Right,
And then I would only pay any tax differential between that, and the same going forward after that.
right. But with the 80% limit that's currently there, you would pay a tax on the $2,000.
Right, so could I
Yeah.
follow up on that?
Yep.
So if you had a $10,000 loss, and I know the limit is 10 million, but let's say it was 10,000, under current law, you could deduct $8,000 this year and
Right.
$2,000 the next year against a profit.
Right,
So you'd still be deducting the loss.
you
I mean,
would,
because in the second year, in your example, you wouldn't have any loss. You'd have a profit the second year. So to some extent, how does that help a business that has a loss the first year, but has a profit the second year?
okay, so from the business's perspective, again, if we use this example, the loss was 10,000, the next year the gain's 10,000. So, they're even, so to speak. Obviously, it's more complex than that, but in general, they're even. But with the 80%, we're saying you have to pay a tax on the 2,000 difference. So they're actually they're in the hole by the amount of the tax the second year. They're not even yet. From the state's perspective, the total that the state gets over time doesn't change. So it's just that we're helping the business early on to hopefully, bootstrap them up. That would be the difference.
Anything else? Yep, go ahead.
If it's about helping new businesses start out, did you consider putting a different time limit on it? I mean, this is like you can deduct all of your losses in that tax year forever, even when you're not a new business anymore.
Well, I think the reason that there's still a limit is, let's face it, if you're a smaller business and you've been running losses for even 5 or 6 years, you may not be able to continue. This gives you up to 10 years. And at that point, I doubt they're even in business.
Okay, thank you.
You all right?
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Keen Mei Wong, Tax Policy Counsel with the DRA.
Good morning. My name is Lauren O'Sullivan, Senior Financial Analyst at the DRA.
The department does not have a position on this bill. The department did prepare a fiscal note, and we distributed the fiscal note quick guide to the members prior to the hearing date. And the calculations resulted in a potential decrease in BPT revenues of $5.7 million. But as mentioned during the hearing just now, is that potentially this $5.7 million could be a timing difference versus a permanent difference. It all depends on the activities of the businesses themselves, whether they are going to survive through and to claim all the losses that they've incurred. If they do go through the whole process through their life cycle and through all the years, potentially it could be a timing difference versus a permanent difference of the 5.7.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on House Bill 450? Seeing none, I'll close public hearing on House Bill 450, and we've got 6-minute recess. So Cindy, my plan is to hold House Bill 1533 relative to safe harbor compensation amounts under the business profits tax, and recognize Representative Janigian to introduce the bill.
Hello again. I'm State Representative John Janigian, representing Salem. And now I'm introducing HB 1533, which passed the House Ways and Means 20-0. And basically, this bill, the safe harbor provision, currently is $75,000. It's been $75,000 since 2011. And what that does is it allows businesses to deduct compensation of up to, in this case, right now, $75,000 without justification. We're proposing, or this bill proposes to raise that from $75,000 to $100,000. If we just look at the inflationary pressures from 2011 till now, it's a no-brainer to go to $100,000 at this point. So not only keeping up with inflation at a minimum, in fact, it probably should be higher than $100,000 to keep up with inflation, but it is a pro-business policy to help, again, small businesses who would take this safe harbor deduction on their business. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Questions?
Question. Do you know how old the 75,000 is?
I believe it's 2011. That's what I wrote in my notes. DRA
Okay.
may be able to confirm
Okay.
that later.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, John. All
Thank
set.
you.
Keen, Moore, come on back up. But before you get started, explain safe harbor provisions.
Okay. Good morning, Senators. My name is Keen Maywell, Tax Policy Counsel with the New Hampshire Department of Revenue.
And I'm Lauren O'Sullivan, Senior Financial Analyst at the DRA.
The department does not have a position on this bill. For the safe harbor deduction, essentially what it does is it allows partnerships, sole proprietorships, and LLCs to take a deduction on the personal compensation up to the current law is $75,000, but without any sort of documentation that's required. Usually, when you take a deduction, usually any kind of revenue agency will require that that deduction be substantiated with documentation. With this, so it's called a safe harbor. So the amount of $75,000 is like, okay, if the business thinks that there is that personal comp that they've performed with personal services, they can deduct up to $75,000, and the bill increases that to $100,000.
Question again, so about 2011 was the last time this was adjusted.
What I have in my notes is actually 2013.
Was when?
2013.
2013.
Yeah, so it's around about that. Maybe Representative Janigian is right, or maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure, but it's 2012, 2011, or 2013.
So it's still 11 years ago, it was the last time it was touched. Follow up, anybody?
And the language starting on line 5 through the end of the paragraph, that's consistent with most of our indexing?
Yes,
for
that's
other
correct.
language?
That is
Okay,
correct.
I just didn't have other in front of me.
Yeah, the indexing was essentially taken from the, right now, the BPT has an indexing, the BET has an indexing, so that's a similar language
Same
that's
language.
used, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on House Bill 1533? I have Peggy from the Nashua Chamber of Commerce and Dave Juve of the BIA signing in support of the bill. And with that, I'll close the public hearing on House Bill 1533. What's that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am still Representative John Janigian, representing Salem. I am now introducing House Bill 1536 relative to the Section 179 expense deduction. That is basically when a business buys equipment or property, they can deduct. Typically, you can either depreciate it or you can deduct a certain amount. And right now, you can deduct up to $500,000 the first year rather than depreciating it over time. The IRS code, of which we conform to New Hampshire conforms to the 2018 IRC code, and that currently allows deduction up to 1.08 million. Now, again, the IRS code can change from time to time, and so this bill proposes not to go to the current IRS code, but just get up to $1 million so that we're close to where it is now. And again, recognizing that business purchases of equipment and assets have increased dramatically over this time, that's the impetus to go to the 1 million. Over time, it's going to be state revenue neutral, because now, yes, in the first year, the state's going to collect less because the depreciation being taken all the first year, but only up to $1 million. So if a business buys $5 million worth of equipment, they're only going to be able to take maximum of 1 million deduction total in that current year. And then they wouldn't be depreciating that particular equipment, over future years. It's already been expensed. So, they're no longer taking a deduction for that. So in general, this would encourage more investment, which means businesses are purchasing more, which potentially means more jobs for those supplying those goods, and hopefully helps the business grow as well. So I'll take any questions if you have any.
Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing us this bill. We got this explanation from DRA, which was really helpful. But down toward the bottom, they point out two things about the way it's drafted. So the intent of the bill, I think, is to increase the amount of the 179 expense, but they point out that it would allow regular depreciation claim for other assets as well, and may include a depreciation claim that year for any expenses disallowed from prior taxable periods. So I guess my question is your intent to restrict the applicability of this bill to the 179 deduction, and we should attempt to address that potential broader impact?
I'm not absolutely sure to the answer to that.
You probably don't have what they sent us.
The one thing that I neglected to say, though, is that this would only apply to assets, thank you, after 2025, January 1st, 2025. So it wouldn't be able to go backwards. It's only going forwards.
So again, it's not a retroactive change in deduction. It's a balance forward type deduction.
Right.
Could I follow up? And what about the issue they raised that it could end up inadvertently being broader than just the 179?
Since I haven't.
I'm sorry, it's the last paragraph
Okay.
on the first page that starts with however. And I was just wondering if your intent was really to limit it to the 179 expense deduction.
Okay, so I'm sorry, the last paragraph on the
On page 1
On page 1, okay.
of the fiscal note quick guide, it starts with however the
Okay.
assets.
So they're talking about assets disallowed, and therefore those disallowed assets would just be depreciated normally. So I'm not sure I understand.
I'm sorry, it says therefore, the line item for taxpayers to claim the allowed regular depreciation includes a depreciation claim for other assets as well. And then it goes on to say, may include a depreciation claim
Right.
that year for any expenses disallowed from prior taxable.
Well, okay, well, I would say I probably need DRA to answer that, because I don't think, they have a larger, better knowledge than I do, but my,
John, why don't we'll just let DRA, so we don't introduce
We'll ask them.
an opinion that might be wrong. So we'll let
I
DRA.
just wanted to know what his intention was.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to say, where it starts in 2025, I don't see how it can go to prior periods, but we'll let DRA
Thank you.
answer that.
So, I have one just statement. So again, the last line on that page that you have just talks about a technical and mechanical problem. And that's just the addition of the words, on or, which means that for the tax year on line 7, because you say on December 31st, that would be within the tax year for 2024, because you have the word on. So I think they want us to strike on or and just say for tax periods after December 31st.
That would make
So
sense.
it's just I think it's just a technical correction that needs to be made, and you have no objection to that?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? And if not, thank you, John. We'll bring up the
Thank
DRA. So the question that's pending for us, that we're going to look for you for an answer is the question of if someone takes this as an allowed expense, how does that interact with the depreciation schedule that they're also allowed to take the expense from? So
Good morning, Senators. My name is Keen Nay Wong, Tax Policy Counsel with the New Hampshire Department of Revenue.
I'm Lauren O'Sullivan, Senior Financial Analyst at DRA.
The DRA does not have a position on this bill. To answer those questions, so essentially, what we're trying to explain in that last paragraph of that page 1 is essentially it's a limitation in our calculation of the fiscal impact. How the form is currently designed is that, yes, the 179 deduction is allowed up to the $500,000 limit, and anything above the $500,000 limit is added back to the tax, and then it's allowed as a depreciation, a regular depreciation, because that means that the businesses are still allowed to claim a depreciation on that particular asset. It's just depending on the timing, whether is it up to the $500,000 or even if in excess, then it would fall into the regular depreciation. So it's just shifting of the of that 1 year deduction from 500,000 that range to the $1 million range. But essentially, the taxpayers will still be able to claim the depreciation, just depending on the speed of the claim. Does that answer the question?
So I just have a clarifying question. So again, so someone buys a $5 million machine,
Right.
right? They can take a $1 million deduction in the first year with
Yeah.
this under that. The extra $4 million, is that what they're allowed to depreciate? Is that
Yep.
how that works? So the extra $4 million, they couldn't take the deduction on, they'd only claim depreciation on the balance
Right.
of the expense.
Yes. So because the $5 million they already claimed it in the first year, so the remaining they're claiming for the rest of the life of the asset, like a usual. Yeah.
After whatever the depreciation rate is for the
Right,
life
yeah.
of the machine. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the intent is to just be about the 179, but you pointed out that it might scoop up other assets as well.
No, maybe we didn't write it as clear as we could. That last paragraph is just to highlight the way the form is designed. We can't really identify the exact fiscal impact of the 179 because there are other depreciation items that go into that line item as well. So
Okay,
So it's not the 170, it's, this bill is just impacting the
clear.
179, yes. It's just
Okay.
the numbers that flowing into that line item on the form, we can't bifurcate that out specifically because
Okay.
there are other things flowing into that line item.
And could I ask a follow-up? And you said that it may include depreciations for expenses disallowed from prior periods.
Right.
The prime sponsor said that it wouldn't because it can't go backwards. Could you?
Yeah, it's not going backwards. Essentially, the depreciation that's disallowed from the prior period, you'll claim it in this period or the next period. So the excess amount of the limit, the limited amount, so the 500,000, let's say it's a $600,000 asset. You claim the 500,000 in the first year, the $100,000 was disallowed, so you claim it as a depreciation in the next year. And that's flowing into that same line. So we couldn't separate that out to come up with the exact impact.
Okay. So that's why it's revenue neutral in the end.
It is most likely a timing of when the business are able to claim the amount, either year one or through the life of the asset. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else signed up to speak? Thank you, David, Peggy, and Ms. Moore, I'm not going to have from Granite State. I think the hospitals are taking the sign and support. Anybody else wish to speak on House Bill 1536? Well, no. We're going to get an open public hearing on House Bill 1613 and recognize the prime sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Representative David Muse. I'm from Portsmouth, and I'm here this morning to introduce House Bill 1613. The motivation for this particular bill was a news story that I saw last year in the New Hampshire Bulletin on a $25 million settlement that the state of New Hampshire received as part of a lawsuit against Monsanto. We received that settlement as compensation for widespread contamination from a class of chemicals known as polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs. Now, PCBs aren't something we've heard a lot about recently. We've heard a lot more about PFAS compounds. But PCBs and PFAS have a lot in common in that they're bioaccumulative, they are in our environment, and they can linger in our environment for hundreds of years. So one of the things I think that's also important to realize about PCBs is how they actually get into the environment. A big problem during the 70s and 80s were old transformers that were used on electrical lines. And PCBs were actually put into the cooling oil that was actually used to regulate the temperature of those transformers so they didn't blow on top of the phone poles. Over time, the quality of that oil deteriorates and they have to do something with it. The problem is it's chock full of PCBs. So one of the things that was done with it over the years is it was actually used, waste oil like that was actually used to keep the dust down on dirt roads in many places in New Hampshire. There are also poorly maintained hazardous waste sites. We have a history of illegal dumping in our state. The bottom line is we have PCBs in 104 of our water bodies here in New Hampshire. We're talking about 63,000 acres of surface water and at least 2.3 linear miles of the Souhegan River. We're also talking about high PCB levels in 20 of our lakes, including Squam Lake, which has the highest level of PCBs. So kind of a long way of getting to the point, which is how did we use the $25 million that we got as part of this settlement? Well, after $5 million went to the lawyers, it turns out that the remaining $20 million was directed to the general fund. So why did it go to the general fund instead of remediating or monitoring the real damage that PCB has done to our lakes, rivers, ponds, and waterways? The answer to that is that we had no law in place that directed the settlement to a specific fund that had already been set up by the legislature. So what this bill does is it attempts to fix the situation going forward, and it would attempt to fix it by creating a soil and water contamination trust fund. So any funds received for any type of environmental contamination settlement where the disposition of settlement money hasn't been previously directed by the legislature would now be deposited into this fund by the Attorney General. The Attorney General would be required to report details of the settlement to the Legislative Fiscal Committee as soon as the funds are deposited. From there, the money can be appropriated by the legislature to address the specific type of contamination the settlement was created to address. Realizing that there is a possibility that the legislature may not agree on how to direct the funds or that there might be settlement money left over in the funds, if after 2 years any funds have not been spent, they may be transferred by immediate use into another fund administered by the Department of Environmental Services. Something to keep in mind is this bill only applies to newly received environmental settlements that fall outside any legislative parameters that we've already established. So for example, it would not apply to any money received from a new PFAS settlement, let's say for groundwater contamination, because the legislature has already directed that those funds be received by the Drinking and Groundwater Trust Fund. So the idea here really is to make sure that if in the future we get another settlement similar to the PCB settlement, where we haven't allocated the funds, we're not in a situation where instead of helping people who've been harmed by contamination or remediating this contamination, we're not in a position where we're just transferring money over to the general fund where it can be spent on environmental remediation. It's not to say it can't be, but it also can be spent on things like copier paper and toner and oil for the lawnmowers that mow the lawn at the State House and all the other things that the general fund gets used for. And I don't think that's what we want to happen to environmental settlement money in this state. So in the House, the reason the bill came to you amended is we did get feedback from the Department of Environmental Services, which wanted more discretion over how unspent money in the fund would be allocated. So for example, if DES concludes that the contamination has been remediated before all the money has been spent, the commissioner could request the state treasurer to transfer the remaining money out of the environmental fund where it could be used to remediate environmental damage in other areas. So it could be transferred over to other environmental funds where, you know, we just sort of have this escalating need. So the bottom line is that money we receive to mitigate the damages to people and the environment of environmental contamination should be spent on mitigating the damage of environmental contamination and the harm that it's caused. And we should never be in a position where we're just simply using that money to pay other expenses. And so what this bill would do is essentially give us an easy way to keep that from happening in the future. And with that, I'll take any questions you have.
Senator Roosevelt?
Good morning. I have 3 questions. One, I'm sure you considered, and I'm curious why you rejected, just putting all future water settlements like this into the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund.
I think part of the issue with this is that we can have contamination that isn't necessarily related to water contamination. So there can, and I'm thinking specifically with PCBs, a lot of the contamination is in soil, and a lot of the contamination that we see in streams is runoff from contaminated soil. And I'm also thinking of all those dirt roads that for years and years we kept the dust down by putting things in there. So what I wanted to try to do was to create something that literally could be used as a holding fund for funds that we haven't already allocated. So we actually already have in state law that if we get settlements related to PFAS contamination, they go into the Drinking and Groundwater Trust Fund.
Can I ask a separate question? Thank you. So we have a law that 10% of any settlements the state receives go into the rainy day fund. There have been cases where we've suspended that provision so that all of the settlement money is directed toward the purpose that somebody wants to spend it to. The way I read this bill, you're not suspending that provision. So 10% would still go into the rainy day fund.
The bill would actually direct, it would actually direct that the money be spent on the environmental contamination issue that the settlement was received for. So for example, what it would require, for example, if there was a environmental contamination falling outside of our other statutes that, let's say, took place in Raymond, what it would mean is we couldn't spend that money to mitigate contamination from some other source in some other part of the state, unless we had first address that contamination in Raymond. So I think part of it also is just an issue of justice. If we're receiving a settlement for contamination, it just makes sense to me that the people who should be first in line to benefit from that settlement are the people and the property owners who've been harmed by it.
Please. But the way it's drafted, the way I read it, they'd actually be second in line to the rainy day fund. Do you agree?
I'm not sure I quite understand your question. So you're saying the way that
Because 10% of all settlements go into the rainy day fund. 90% go elsewhere. Sometimes we suspend that provision so that 100%
okay.
goes towards the purpose. The way I read this bill, you haven't.
I was not aware of it. I was aware of the percentage that goes to the lawyers, but I wasn't aware of the percentage that went to the rainy day fund.
Okay, but, so you wouldn't be opposed to that?
So if you wanted to account for that, that would be good. And I think one of the things too that has come across to me loud and clear is the Department of Environmental Services. And I'm not sure if anybody is here to speak for them today, and I won't try to do that. But one of the things we've been trying to do through this process is to really take in line or take into account the guidance and the feedback that we've received from them about how we could actually make this, more useful and help it address more situations and give them more flexibility as well.
Okay, thank you. So, on page 2, in the Roman 4, that after the 2 years, there could be transfer to one or more dedicated funds as directed to the commissioner. Would you be willing to have the fiscal committee approve that transfer?
Yes, yeah, and I think that was one of the issues that the DES raised on their third reading of the amended bill, is that it might be better if everything went through the fiscal committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Well, I was going to ask Adam the question, but again, the 2-year period seems tight to me, given the contamination and notice of when an incident's going on by the time it's settled, and whether or not I'm a little nervous just about a 2-year timeline. I'm wondering whether we should extend that out to
I'm
create a
sorry,
greater window.
Mr. Chair, I have a hearing.
Sorry, so the question was, the 2-year issue for me was more about maybe we need a bigger window of time for remediation of these events. And I'll ask Adam that question, but would you be opposed if we extended that 2-year period to 4-year period if the department thinks it's appropriate to?
Absolutely not. This is really, the intention of this is just to make sure we're spending money for environmental settlements on environmental remediation. That's it.
Thank you. Just a soil contamination version of the opioid trust fund.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Adam? Thank you, Dave.
For the record, I'm Adam Crapo, the Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Environmental Services. I'm here today to let you know that we do not take a position on this bill, but we wanted to point out a couple challenges you might consider, and I think Senator Rosenwald pointed one out, which is that we would prefer the fiscal committee to approve these transfers because, or the appropriation or transfer, because it would allow us to be more nimble, more flexible in our approach. Right now, this has the entire general court, both the Senate and the House, approving an appropriation, and that can occur currently if the funds go into the general fund. Right now, the House and the Senate could transfer those to another fund or direct them somewhere else. So I think having the entire general court approve that it sort of defeats the purpose of the bill. And then the other piece of that is it isn't clear who the commissioner, the commissioner would request, if the department felt that the issue was taken care of already, that we could request that the treasurer transfer these funds. It's not clear if the entire general court would also have to approve of that, or if it would just be the treasurer unilaterally. And so those are the two things that I wanted to bring up here today. Also happy to take any questions on the bill and help draft an amendment if you'd like.
Yes, we would like.
Yeah.
And again, I think we're still talking all about paragraph 4, right, in the bill,
Yes.
right? The 2 years and then the transfer of any remaining settlement funds.
For paragraph 4, yes, this happens very rarely. The most recent example I can think of is the Monsanto case, which is what Representative Muse brought up. In that case, we got $20 million after legal fees and attorney's costs. And that all went to the general fund, and through HB2, the governor actually, in his initial budget, proposed transferring $6 million of that to a PCB assistance fund. And the House, I believe, in their version, cut it back to $1 million, and that's what ultimately passed in the final budget. And so that's the most recent example I can think of. This happens relatively rarely, where we don't have a situation where it's already prescribed in statute. So in some cases, it wouldn't be, a $20 million, maybe a few $100,000 or something like that. So just having some flexibility in there, I think allowing, less than the 2 years or more than the 2 years, just some sort of flexibility in that language would be helpful for us to maybe request that.
I have one other question.
Yeah.
And that because this isn't necessarily all about lawsuits, right? It says or other actions.
Right.
And so my concern is where you have an administrative action occurring between a developer and the agency, where you're negotiating a settlement of some sort that never makes it to court. It's a contamination problem. You're dealing with it, and there may be fines or penalties assessed. Is your reading of this bill that all that money would have to go into this fund? How does it affect the rest of your funding? Because I know that you're one of those semi-self-funding agencies.
My reading of, or our reading of this is that anything that would currently go into the general fund would go into this fund if it had to do with soil or environmental contamination. It would not. My reading is it wouldn't affect those funds where, if let's say we take an enforcement action against somebody or something like that, where there's a dedicated fund, it would not affect that. We could check with the Attorney General's office to make sure that's the case, but that's the way I read it. I think in paragraph 5A and B, that hopefully takes care of that concern.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.